Hello, I'm Paul Miles. This is the ISBH series on apologetics, and today we will be discussing a response to the lost tribes myth. Allow me to share my screen. Let's see here. Okay, uh, this should be visible. Okay. If you have not already, please mute your microphones. Am I able to mute from my screen here or not? Maybe not. Uh, okay, no big deal. If not, okay, we'll move along then with the presentation. Okay, so responding to the lost tribes myth. First, we will discuss a little bit what the lost tribes myth is, and then we'll take a look at what the Bible says. To understand what the lost tribes myth is, in short, it means it's the idea that we have 12 tribes of Israel, 10 of which are lost, the other two not being lost, preserved in the Babylonian exile, and then the rest have been lost, typically often with a connotation that the 10 lost tribes are actually to be found in another ethnic group. So first, what are the 12 tribes of Israel? Whenever I teach Genesis, I like to teach my students this acronym. Uh, Repentant sinners love Jesus. Do not give animals in zoos jelly beans. Each letter from the first letter of each word in the sentence corresponds with a tribe of Israel. If you ever need help remembering, it's Reuben, Simeon, Levi, Judah, Dan, Naphtali, Gad, Asher, Issachar, Zebulun, Joseph, and Benjamin. So here is a map of Israel. Now, the specifics of where exactly the borders are will differ from map to map. The Bible describes the dividing of the land, and this is one organization of it. So, whenever Israel enters the land in the book of Joshua, they divide the land into territories as follows. Um, Now, my proposal here is that whenever Israel entered the land in the book of Joshua, they came to possess the land. The 12 tribes of Israel have maintained a presence in the land of Israel from the days of Joshua until today, and they will continue to possess the land and be present in the territories until the end of the current earth when God gives us new heavens and a new earth. That is a point that I hope to prove. And that would be an argument that would be very much in conflict with the ideas that 10 tribes have been lost. So, where do they get the idea that 10 tribes have been lost? Well, as we read the biblical narrative and study the history of Israel, we get into a period where we end up with a monarchy. Of course, David is the most famous king. Before him, we have Saul. After him, we have Solomon. And then soon after the generations of Solomon, we start to see division within the kingdom, and we end up with two kingdoms, if you will. You have the northern kingdom and the southern kingdom. Often the northern is called Israel, and the southern is called Judah. The main tribes in the south are Judah and Benjamin, and so it's assumed that the other 10 tribes are Israel. Okay. And as we read along, we see that the northern kingdom is conquered by Assyria, and then the southern is brought into exile in Babylon. Okay, these are facts which are very well presented in the biblical narrative. No problem here. But the question is, what happens with the nation of the northern kingdom of Israel? There are some that say that the 10 tribes of Israel went into captivity and then disappeared into obscurity. And that's the point that we're trying to disagree with here. But it's also a key point in trying to replace Israel with other nationalities. One movement would be British Israelism, which says 10 tribes went into captivity. They eventually wandered north, ended up in the British Islands, and that really it's the British people, the British Empire, that is the true Israel that God has made the covenant with. Let's take a look at some texts that the British Israelites have said to promote their ideas. All right, here's one by a Lieutenant Colonel H.W.J. Sr. He opens his book with the question, are the British Israelites? He assumes the answer is yes, and he recognizes that this is a topic that was contended in his days. So the purpose of the book was to prove that the British have Hebrew origins. Let's see. He says that our opponents have been indefatigable in bringing forward every argument in their power to disprove the statement that we are the 10 tribes of Israel. And I happen to think that the opponents are right here. But he says, I feel confident the answer to the question will be yes, we, the British, are Israelites. God has fulfilled his covenant with Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, and David, and will fulfill all his promises to Israel. And by Israel, he means England. He presents the argument as follows, that several component elements of British are descended from the same primitive stocks that go all the way to the 7th century BC when Israel went into captivity with Assyria. He says the 10 tribes of Israel were taken captive in the 8th century BC and placed on the southern shore of Caspian Sea, where they remained for a short time. And then they migrated westward. They were designated as Scuths. And then referring to Jehu, the house of Omri, a king of 10 tribed Israel. Then the big conclusion in point 3, therefore there is every reason to believe that the British must be descended from 10 tribed Israel. So the British are the 10 tribes that got lost during the Assyrian captivity. Okay, here's Colonel Garnier. It's interesting that a lot of these proponents, especially from the 19th century British version, tend to have something of a military implication here, right? They would say such an empire must therefore exist as the present day. The 10 tribes, after being cast away, were to be wanderers among the nations. And so he says there is only one nation and race in the world at the present time. Now we're talking 19th century here, when we have the British Empire, and the sun never sets on the British Empire, which fulfills the predictions that have been mentioned, and that is Britain and the Anglo-Saxon race. Britain and her great colonies constitute a nation and a company of nations, and the Anglo-Saxon race have spread abroad all over the earth to the west and the south and the north and the south. And elsewhere in the book, he goes on to say that the expansion of the British Empire was a godsend, that was a God growing his kingdom on earth, and so forth. Now, one of my favorite proofs that the British are indeed the 10 lost tribes is in the following quote. The previous two are written by military leaders. This one comes from a clergyman, actually an American, Reverend J.H. Allen. He appeals to the Hebrew language. We have brought you through this group of words to show that ish in Hebrew means a man. Okay, that is a Hebrew word meaning man. Now take the Hebrew word which is translated covenant, which in its original form has no vowels, but which in its anglicized form remains a vowel I to preserve the Y sound, and we have breath, which joined with, breath is the Hebrew word for covenant. So you take breath from Hebrew, ish also from Hebrew. Then we have breath ish, which he says means a covenant man. Today, the British people are men of the covenant. They're called Britons and are dwelling in the British Isles, exclamation point, exclamation point, exclamation point. In other words, the reason that we have the term British is precisely because they are the covenant people of Israel. This is some wacky stuff. Now, again, this goes way back. This is 1917 when this theologian wrote it. Here is a more recent statement by Alexander Dugin. This particular statement is found in a text that was written in 1999. So this is 9 years before the invasion of Georgia. It is 15 years before the invasion of Ukraine. in 2014. The war started then, not in 2022. It only got worse then. He repeats this bit in a couple of different places. The particular text I was looking at to pull this from came from 1999. It might actually go a little bit further back to 1993. It can be difficult trying to put a good date on some of Dugin's writings. Here is a translation. Do Americans themselves realize the theological rationale of their geopolitical opposition with Eurasia, with Russia? Undoubtedly less, and often much more clearly than do Russians. There's a thought that for some reason, a lot of Americans think that Russia and America were allies after the collapse of the Soviet Union, that somehow they became the good guys. And it wasn't until we somehow provoked Russia to invade Ukraine that Russia and America became enemies. No, their political theorists have long said that America and Russia are enemies. Part of the reason being there exists a special Protestant eschatological teaching that is called dispensationalism, from the Latin word dispensation. According to this theory, God has one plan relating to Christian Anglo-Saxons and a different one that relates to the Jews, and a third one that relates to all other nations. Anglo-Saxons are considered the descendants of the 10 tribes of Israel that did not return to Judea from their Babylonian captivity. These 10 tribes remembered their origins, having accepted Protestantism as their basic confession. Those are in quotation marks, but he doesn't actually give any citations for us to chase down who actually said that other than him. Okay, so according to Russian political theory, America and Russia are enemies because dispensationalists exist, and dispensationalists hold to British Israelism. Now, since then, most notably in a book that he wrote in 2023, Alexander Dugin has tweaked his understanding of dispensationalism. Obviously, this is not dispensationalism, but non-believers are trying to affiliate us with the British Israelite movement. Here we have a book by Carrie Ladner that just came out this year, in which she affiliates British Israelism and Christian Zionism. Christian Zionism is a movement that many of us dispensationalists would be affiliated with. It basically just means that Israel has the right to the land. And a lot of us who are dispensationalists would agree, and a lot of non-dispensationalists would agree. So she would say that, in short, Christian Zionism and British Israelism are going hand in hand, even though they're contradictory. British Israelism insists that America is not like Israel, but rather America is Israel. That's kind of a next step, that America comes from Britain. Therefore, since England is Israel, America must be Israel too. And then, speaking of the January 6th event, Christian Zionists responded to Trump's election loss against Joe Biden in a vein drawn from British Israelism. In a blog post that she wrote a few years ago, she gets a little bit more explicit, saying that some of the starkest images from the Capitol riot of January 6th were of evangelical Christians and racist skinheads working side by side to topple American democracy, was apparently the goal of the people over there. She says that British Israelites celebrated the Zionist movement that sought to regather the diaspora in the Holy Land, and they saw Britain as the guardian of Zionism. While contemporary Christian Zionism in America does not promote British Israelism, today's Christian Zionists see themselves as fulfilling the same role. They simply replace Britain with the United States as the guardian of Israel. Okay, so those are some, that's how the British Israelism works, the idea being that the 10 lost tribes are actually Britain and the colonies, including America. This is how we see Russism and leftism trying to affiliate us with that movement. But that's the British imperial Israelism. That's not the only version of this myth that exists. There's also the Black Hebrew Israelites movement, which will go around saying that they are the true Israel. Apparently, in this version, Israel, the 10 lost tribes get lost, but not in Europe. Instead, they go to Africa, and then many of them end up becoming enslaved and being pushed into America. So that now, if you see a black man in America, he is the true Jew. And it's interesting seeing these people try to reach Hasidic Jews. They'll walk up and say, "We are the real Jews." And my favorite response that I've seen the Hasidics say, is, as much as I disagree with them, they say, "Oh, okay, you're Jews. That's great. Follow the Torah then." And that makes the Hebrew Israelites back down every time that I've seen it on the internet, at least. It's deeply anti-Semitic, it's violent, it's concerning. Here is a short video that was shared on X a while back of Black Hebrew Israelites chanting, "We are the real Jews." It is an anti-Semitic trope with dangerous potential. It is a supremacist ideology. And it's not alone. You can go to Wikipedia and go down the rabbit hole and read about the Moorish Science Temple of America, Christian identity. Of course, there's also Nordic Israelism, that the Nords are the true Jews. And then there's French Israelism, that the French are the true Jews. There's a Japanese version. It's crazy because it's so anti-Semitic, right? What other people group do you have where you have one group hating the other group, saying we are superior to that group on the basis that we are that group? But that's how anti-Semitic replacement theology, especially with a lost tribes bent, works. Okay, so that's some of the fringe stuff that we're seeing now, that Israel has been replaced by various nations and ethnicities because of the Assyrian exile. Now, if, however, the tribes were not lost in the exile, then all of those arguments completely fall apart. So that's the point that I would like to look at. Now, sometimes you'll see people appeal to some statements, perhaps in rabbinic writings or Josephus, for support. Let's take a look at those statements. So in Mishnah Sanhedrin, we have this. The words of Rabbi Akiva: "The 10 tribes are not ready to come back, as it is stated, and cast them into another land as at this day. Just as the day goes and does not return, so too they have gone and will not return." Rabbi Eliezer says, "As at this day, just as the day darkens and lightens, so too it has become dark for the 10 tribes, but the future is bright for them." Some might appeal to these statements as saying, see, the 10 tribes are lost. Or they might appeal to this statement by Josephus: "But all the people of Israel remained in that place, and so that 2 tribes stand in Asia and Europe subjected to Romans, while the 10 tribes are across the Euphrates until now. They are great myriads whose numbers cannot be known." However, do these 2 statements actually support the notion that the 10 tribes are lost? I don't think so. It's actually speaking to the preservation of the 10 tribes. It does recognize that there are people from 10 tribes that are scattered outside of the land, but that speaks of nothing about those who might be in the 10 tribes still within the land. So I think whenever we see people trying to appeal to such statements from Jewish sources, they might be taking those statements out of context. But let's go back to the actual exiles themselves and take a look at what actually happened in history. Here is our map again, with our 12 tribes listed on the left. Now, the 2 tribes, which they would say are in Judah while the rest are lost, would be Benjamin and Judah. And at the end of 2nd Chronicles and the beginning of Ezra, we see the return from Babylonian exile. So let's see if the 10 lost tribes myth can survive an entire 5 verses of the book of Ezra. Okay, Ezra begins with the first year of Cyrus, king of Persia, whenever he gives the decree releasing the Jews to go back to the land. Verse 5, "Then the heads of the fathers' households of Benjamin and Judah, and the priests and the Levites rose up in order to go back." So we have Judah, Benjamin, and Levites. So going back, it is not only Benjamin and Judah, but also the Levites. Now, if we look at the map here, where is the land of the Levites? There isn't one, right? Deuteronomy 10:9. "Therefore, Levi does not have a portion or inheritance with his brothers. The Lord is his inheritance, just as the Lord your God spoke to him." This is in reference to the dividing of the land. So the Levites did not have their own territory. They were all over the place, okay? Now, in the map, we do have 12 territories. Manasseh and Ephraim are divided. Those are the 2 sons of Joseph, so collectively that would be the tribe of Joseph. But if we look at it, Levi was preserved alongside Benjamin and Judah as being one of the 3 significant tribes in the land of Judah. So 12 minus 3, we didn't have many math classes in seminary, but I do believe that comes to 9, which is less than 10. We do not have 10 tribes that are lost, according to Ezra chapter 5. But wait, there's more. You might notice that in the division of the land, right, from the book of Joshua, we have Simeon here within Judah. So Joshua 19:1 says, Then the second lot went to Simeon, to the tribe of the sons of Simeon, according to their families, and their inheritance was in the midst of the inheritance of the sons of Judah. The inheritance, in verse 9, the inheritance of the son of Simeon was taken from the portion of the sons of Judah, because the share of the sons of Judah was too large for them. So the sons of Simeon received an inheritance in the midst of Judah's inheritance. Now, evidently, Simeon was not as big as Judah. They have a smaller portion, but we have every reason to believe that Simeon was within the southern kingdom. They might not have been as predominant as Judah and Benjamin in several regards. But indeed, what does the Bible say? 2 Chronicles 15:9, and he, speaking of Asa, gathered all Judah and Benjamin, and those from Ephraim, Manasseh, and Simeon, who resided with them. For many defected to him from Israel when they saw that the Lord God was with them. So as much as Simeon may have been in conflict with Judah, there were several within Simeon that were not, and stayed there in the territory. And also Ephraim and Manasseh. So if we bring over Simeon, as well as Joseph, those are the two tribes, the two half tribes of Manasseh and Ephraim. We now have 5 out of 2 tribes that are not lost. We also have this very interesting mention in the Gospel of Luke. Luke 2:36. There was a prophetess Anna, the daughter of Phanuel of the tribe of Asher. She was advanced in many years, and then we get into the whole thing with Anna, which is just a really interesting part of the Christmas narrative. But let's set Christmas aside here and talk about who she is. She is known to be in the tribe of Asher. This is centuries after the Assyrian exile, and we have someone from the tribe of Asher way up here who is present at the time. This should come as no surprise because in 2 Chronicles we see, nevertheless, some men of Asher, Manasseh, and Zebulun. We've already talked about Manasseh, right, from Joseph, humbled themselves and came to Jerusalem. So we already have named Asher, Zebulun, Joseph, Benjamin, Simeon, Levi, and Judah, named in the Bible as tribes that were present in the land after the exile. This leaves us with an entire 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 tribes out of 10 that we have not yet mentioned. 5 of the alleged 10 tribes are present in the land after the exile and before. Okay, so we've got an accountability of these 5. It's interesting also, if we look at some of the lists in Ezra and Nehemiah, there are some further hints that perhaps other tribes were preserved as well. Here is a list of the men returning to the land from Babylonian captivity. It's one of the passages that there's sort of a tendency to kind of have your eyes glaze over and miss a lot of really cool details. But among these, we have, for example, the sons of Azgad. I'm working on a commentary on Ezra Nehemiah as part of the Ariel Bible Commentary series. And in that commentary, I discuss more some potential locations that are listed here that might be outside of that Judah, Benjamin area. But Azgad, for example, there's strong reason to suggest that perhaps Azgad is a reference to the tribe of Gad, which is right out here on the other side of the river from Benjamin and Judah and would be part of the northern kingdom. But very well could be that people from Gad were part of the Babylonian exile of the southern kingdom. Okay. But we also have this passage. If those are not enough, if those are not convincing enough, we have the names of several tribes that defected and came down to the south and were were preserved throughout Assyrian captivity. But we also have this passage in 2 Chronicles 11:14 through 17. For the Levites left their pasture lands and their property and went to Judah and Jerusalem because Jeroboam and his sons had excluded them from serving as priests of the Lord. He set up priests of his own from the high places for the satires and the calves which he had made. Those from all the tribes of Israel who set their hearts on seeking the Lord God of Israel followed them to Jerusalem to sacrifice to the Lord God of their fathers. They strengthened the kingdom of Judah and supported Rehoboam, the son of Solomon, for 3 years, for they walked in the way of David and Solomon for 3 years. So we see prior to the Assyrian and Babylonian captivities that from all the tribe of Israel, they came down to the southern kingdom. So even if the Assyrians were able to produce a bunch of nuclear weapons and completely wipe out every single human being in the entire territory of northern Israel, God still would have been able to preserve the Jews quite plainly from the fact that all 12 tribes had a contingency in the southern kingdom. So here's a realignment of the 12 kingdoms, 12 tribes again. Again, Levi is scattered all over the place. But is that the only way that people were preserved? By being down in Judah? Not necessarily. Here is a tablet recording Sargon's annals, the record of his activities, and it speaks of his conquest of the northern kingdom. And he says, and this might be an exaggeration, by the way, the real numbers may have been less than this. This is propaganda, right? So the king conquering the northern kingdom says 27,290 men who dwelt in Samaria I carried off, 50 chariots for my royal army. From among them I selected, and I caused others to take their portion. Okay, so he took 27,290 men, probably less, but we'll give him that. Estimates are that the population of the Northern Kingdom was 400,000 to 500,000, and he got less than 30,000. So, in other words, Sargon, whenever he came and conquered and took people into captivity, he did not take everyone out of the Northern Kingdom. It wouldn't even make sense to take everyone out of the northern kingdom. It makes sense to like kidnap the best and the brightest and to take them with you. Nebuchadnezzar did the same thing to the south, right? But being as how he is now in control over that territory, wouldn't it make more sense to like, oh, I don't know, put tax on them, make them pay tribute and tax? Well, they can't pay tribute and tax if they're not there. It's better for them to maintain a local economy and for you to harvest tributes and tax from that. So there's no reason to think that everybody in the northern kingdom disappeared out of the north. Okay, so not only did God preserve the 12 tribes in the south, he also preserved the rest of the tribes in the north as well, actually in the territory, in the land. We have no reason to think that everybody was brought out. Significant portions did come out. It was a terrible time. Nobody is denying that. But the idea that the tribes were somehow lost, no, that does not align with the biblical narrative. It does not align with the archaeology. What's more, as we read further in Ezra, there are 2 occasions in which we have some sacrifices, and this comes up. Okay, so the sons of Israel, the priest, oh, those pesky Levites again, not wanting to be up in the northern 10 tribes, they're down there too. Okay, so they celebrate the dedication of the temple. They offered for the dedication of the temple 100 bulls, 200 rams, 400 lambs, and as a sin offering for all Israel, 12 male goats corresponding to the number of the tribes of Israel, because all 12 tribes are still there. And then in chapter 8, the exiles who came from the captivity offered burnt offerings to the God of Israel. 12 bulls for all Israel, because all of Israel had been preserved. We didn't lose 10 tribes somehow or another. And then as we read further in the Bible, right, we get this bit. For example, in the book of James, we see James writing after the resurrection of Christ, so several centuries later, he writes to the 12 tribes who are dispersed abroad. Greetings, with the understanding that they still had a unity of the 12 tribes out and about. Um, let's see. Here we have a point where Israel and the northern kingdom, the southern kingdom, it's kind of their official, that's it, no more, we're done with each other. What share do we have in David? We have no inheritance. It's the son of Jesse. Everyone to your tents, Israel. Now look after your own house, David. So all Israel went away to their tents. But as for the sons of Israel who lived in the cities of Judah, Rehoboam reigned over them. So even at that point, whenever they divided, we still have the sons of Israel, the north, in the south. And then we see the king Rehoboam and so forth. And then verse 19. So Israel has been in rebellion against the house of David to this day. Now, the book of Chronicles, there's some debate over the actual authorship of it. I tend to think there's a good case to be made that this is Ezra writing from Babylon before he makes his own aliyah to the land. But it is certainly after the return of the Jews, because at the end of the book, we have Cyrus releasing everybody. So this is far in the future, and we still see Israel in rebellion against the house of David to that day. So the fact that we still have Israel in conflict, the northern kingdom and the southern kingdom in conflict, would indicate that we still have a northern kingdom for the southern kingdom to be in conflict with. So the Bible has several indications that the 10 tribes were not lost. That simply does not align with what we're seeing stated explicitly in the Bible, as well as several mentions along the way, such as this. So, conclusion. The 10 tribes were not lost in exile. And so theories that identify the 10 tribes with Gentile nations or ethnicities simply have no foundation in historical reality. Therefore, we have no reason to doubt that all 12 tribes of Israel have had a continued presence in the land from Joshua through today, and that this presence will continue until the current earth passes away in accordance with Revelation 21:1. Okay, so that is the proposal. Thank you so much for attending. I will now turn off the recording and we can entertain questions from there.